Well, thank you all for being here for this Ray Talk today. I'm really excited about the subject, living in our higher self. I've been thinking about this theme all week. What does that mean to live in our higher self? And do we even have a higher self? You know, a lot of spiritual teachers are always talking about higher self, right? To be living in your higher self or to make access to your higher self. How do we know we have one if we haven't made contact with it? You know, and I was just questioning myself. Well, this higher self, I mean, the Course in Miracles talks about your God-created self, your real self versus your false ego self. So this is an ongoing theme that the Course talks about. And just because we're not in touch with it doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that's the point that I got for myself when I was meditating this week about the higher self. It came to me, this analogy. It was kind of beautiful, and maybe it's helpful for you too. Like, let's just say you're in a concert hall and you're going to hear a symphony play, a Mozart symphony, right? So you go in the concert hall, the orchestra comes out, they're getting ready, they're not playing the symphony yet. But where is that symphony before it gets played? You can't say it doesn't exist. You can't say that you're hearing it. You can't say that you're sensing that symphony. But you also can't say, well, just because I can't hear it, it must not be there. So this symphony it's like an idea. It's like a map of relationships, right? So the notes, everything, the orchestration, what instruments are going to play what part of the music, that all is there, whether the orchestra is playing it or not. So Mozart, being the genius that he was, put together these beautiful sounds from an orchestra, and then when it gets played, then we sense it, and then we can feel the beauty of it, right? So it's similar with the higher self. Just because we're not sensing it doesn't mean it's not there. Just like the music is there even when the orchestra is not playing it. But then when the orchestra gets tuned up and they get focused, and you know, all the people in that orchestra, the conductor included, they're totally focused on this higher sound, this more perfected sound, and then they apply themselves to that order, that plan, or that higher self of the music, and then it comes out as this symphony, and we can hear it and we can sense it, and aha, there it is. And it lasts for maybe an hour, but then the music stops and we don't hear it after that, except maybe in our memory, in our head. So that's similar to the higher self, how the higher self operates. It's like always there for us. It's a perfected relationship. It's a beautiful relationship. And then when we're really in touch with it, we see its manifestation, or we see, like there's a lesson that says all things are echoes of the voice for God. So, well, the voice for God is this higher self, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call that. And we're not always aware of it, but we don't doubt that it's there. Just like we don't doubt that there's a Mozart symphony ready to be played. And then it's played and it comes through. And then it's an echo of that perfection. And then we see it or we hear it. and then we see, wow, there it is. So this is kind of what it's like living with our higher self. May not be aware of it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, but we sense it's there, and we sense that sometimes we have access to it when we really are focused on it, and there it is. Our life unfolds, and we couldn't ascribe it to anything other than the Holy Spirit or our higher self is guiding us. Hi, Prue. Nice to have you. So I just wanted to ask each of you, what is your experience of your higher self? So maybe since Prue, you're on with your microphone open, let's start with you. So how do you experience your higher self?
That's a good question.
I would say that I'm experiencing my higher self when I feel aligned and strong and clear, and there's an element of fearlessness as well. So that's some ways, and I can take action. Yeah, I feel prompted. I'm still waking up, but that's the best I can do.
So what I'm hearing is you experience it most when you feel a clarity and a fearlessness in a particular action that you're taking. So is that?
Yes,
yeah.
that is some elements of it.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So those would be attributes of this higher self: clarity, fearlessness, willingness to take an action. When we see that there's an action being, given to us to take, we take it. We don't procrastinate. We don't say, oh, well, no, we don't doubt it. We just say, oh, this is clear. This is a clear action I need to take. And we take it, and there's no fear in that. Somewhat, I think, because we sense we are being guided. The higher self is like a guide, just like I was saying before. The music that Mozart wrote down, and it's all like in a form, and you can follow it, and it's very specific. That's kind of like the higher self of that music. They're following that. They don't have to doubt it. It's already perfected. It's already complete. And they're just following through and giving us the echo of it. So I think that's a good answer, Prue. It has clarity, has fearlessness, and it's willing to act, willing to play the music, so to speak. Yeah, thank you. So Kathy, how do you experience your higher self?
I have a lot of different names. I guess I think my higher self is my soul, as God, as awareness. I have faith that it exists and it's guiding my life. It's kind of back here, watching everything that's going on. And if it sees I'm going the wrong way, it'll bring me back online.
Okay, so then another attribute of the higher self is that it's a guide. It's a kind of overseer of your life, and it can direct your course, and it can also correct your course. Like if you're going a little bit the wrong way, it can say, "Oops, wait, don't go too far down that road. You got to make a turn and go over here." So it's like a guidance system. That's what I'm hearing you say. GPS, right? So the higher self is our wonderful GPS, inner GPS. And where does that GPS come from? I mean, like it's in the ethers, right? It's like you turn your phone on and Wow, there it comes on, but where does it come from? How are all those satellites working together to show me exactly where I am and where I'm going and where I need to go? Yeah. So yeah, that's a beautiful explanation of the higher self. So Pam, how do you experience your higher self?
So I can relate to the things that have been said so far for sure. So maybe those are common to all of our, all higher selves. But for me, you know, when you asked that question, the first thing that came to my mind, it was like an energy. I feel like a frequency, like when everything's kind of lined up, and my mind and heart are calm, and it's usually after like a result of having done my practices, my spiritual practices. It's just this real stillness. And it's almost like the energy that's between things, like all the molecules, like the energy that's in between is just so still and like a joy that's there. And it can be guiding, but it also can just be very still and very peaceful.
Oh, okay.
And definitely, I can hear my heart when I'm in that space. So that's the way I feel if I'm connected to my higher self, clearly.
Very good.
In a sense, yeah.
So then there's an atmosphere that we can feel around when we're connected to that higher self part of us that has peace, has stillness, has tranquility, free of conflict, feels good, feels total, whole, complete, and this deep inner peace that accompanies our contact with our higher self. That's very good. We're getting these things down, and I mean everyone's sharing a little bit slightly different thing, but all these things together are very descriptive of attributes that have come to us from the higher self. So thank you, Pam. Okay, Norma, how do you experience your higher self?
Well, yes, it's a little bit of everyone's what they've said, but also I want to say for myself, it's when I get quiet, maybe meditative, and if I have a question, I will get the answer. And also energy. I think it's, for me, I experience it as a warm, suffusive energy. So I can be quiet. I can ask questions. I can feel it's a peaceful, happy energy. I mean, I want to say there's even like colors with it for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this safety, I'm hearing from you kind of in the background, like there's a safe, warm feeling from it, like a security feeling almost even. Yeah. So, well, those are all very beautiful descriptions of how we experience our higher self. So I think the more we give ourselves that space to make the contact, and the more these positive aspects of it come to us. I think that's the key. It's like, how much attention are we giving to being in touch with our higher self? And then what throws us out of that? Like sometimes we don't really feel we're in the higher self. We're in some kind of a situation, or we're in maybe even a conflict, or we're not feeling quite good. We're feeling like pressure or problems that aren't getting solved, that kind of thing. Well, that's the very time when we need to be in touch with the higher self the most. So it's a question of how do we reboot, or how do we redirect our energy when we find ourselves not feeling the higher self. Could that be like a strong question for all of us? how do we reboot ourselves back into the higher self sort of energy when we find ourselves going off. I think for me, that's the time that Sandra and I most need like our spiritual practice, or what we call sometimes a timeout. Like if things are going like in a direction that we know is clearly not feeling good, or our higher self directing us, we say, okay, let's stop here and let's take a time out, and then we'll sit quiet and do some Om Namah Shivayas, or just sit quiet. And then we kind of reboot, and we forgive whatever that is that's just happening and distracting us from our peace of mind. I think in the Course it says you decide that you don't make decisions by yourself, and then you decide to have a happy day. And if your day is not going in that direction, then you have to drop it and say, I must have been wrong in the decisions I made because my day is not going happy. Or I must have been doing something to disconnect myself from the higher self, from my higher self. Because the attributes you all described, they were very positive, they were very good feeling, they were very, very much upbeat, So I think in those moments where you, I, everyone, you don't feel upbeat, you feel like this kind of heavy energy, that could also be the Holy Spirit too, or the higher self too, telling you you're going the wrong way. So we have to pay attention to that, not make it wrong. Like if we're feeling irritated, or if we're feeling overly pressured or under duress, sometimes those feelings are like they're like signs. Okay, stop what you're doing. Reconsider, readjust, recalibrate. So they're just as much, when we're not feeling those sort of warm, peaceful feelings, whatever that other feeling is could be just as important to be showing us a direction. And then that also could be the Holy Spirit's or the higher self's function. Tara Singh once said, the purpose of the Holy Spirit, it has two purposes. One is correction, like just what I'm saying. If you're going the wrong way and you need to readjust, the Holy Spirit's there to say, whoa, wait a minute, this is off, you need to go another way. So that's correction. And then the other is what you all just described. It's like the celebration of this joy, of this happiness within, because you have this connection with your higher self and you're certain of it. You have the clarity, you have the direction, you have the courage to take a step, to take an action, and it's peaceful. And when you really get in that space, it's very, very pleasant, very peaceful, very uplifting. Living with our higher self, that's the subject of this talk. And this is the subject we need to give attention to in our life. It's easy, they have that saying, it's easy to meditate in a cave, but the real test is, can you meditate in a crowd? Like if you're not meditating in a crowd and you're not peaceful in a crowd, then you're not really meditating. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Like we're all working people, we're all in the world, we're all engaged in our life. And in that engagement, many different kinds of situations and people come to our attention. So we're in the crowd, so to speak. Now, this isn't to say that in your spiritual practice you have to always be in the crowd, because sometimes you do need that alone time. You do need that time in the cave to reboot. You do need that time on the mountaintop to be totally alone and in solitude. But then, as we come back out in the world, we want to maintain that connection. We don't want to be thrown off by things that come our way that are difficult. We want to use the very contact we made when we were in our alone time, and we had the certainty of that divine connection, and bring that into our daily affairs. And I think that's what the saying means. If you can't meditate in a crowd, you're not really meditating. Well, I mean, the purpose of our divine action, let's say, we all have a divine purpose, we all have a divine action, is to bring that clarity into the worldly situation that we find ourselves. That's the purpose. Like, we all came here to clean something up, mostly in our own life, right? But then once we've kind of cleaned it up in our own life, then we're more balanced, we're more in our divine connection, and then we can start cleaning up the things around us, the people, places, and things right around us. And that's a function of our higher self. First, we get ourselves clear, and then we share that clarity with the people around us, and that's the crowd. Yes, we get the clarity when we're in the cave, or when we're in our solitude, or when we're in our spiritual practice each day. We get the clarity, we get the energy, we get the peace, we get the directions, and then out in the crowd. We had a situation yesterday, and it's actually one of the people in this A Year I Give to God program, and she came for the Breathe yesterday. I'm not sure, maybe she hadn't done a Breathe before. And we all shared, and then she shared, well, I live alone, and I live in the woods, and I'm kind of not in the world, I'm out in the woods. And then she proceeded to tell us how horrible the world is, and it's just a place where people come to die, and da-da-da-da-da. And, this picture she was painting of the world was pretty dismal. And she was going on and on about it, And we said, finally, yeah, but, a spiritual life is meant to come into the world and clean some of that stuff up that you're talking about. And that's really the function of your spiritual life, is to help bring order, or help bring the light of the divine, which we experience as what you all just said: peace, joy, clarity, direction, safety, all those qualities that the higher self brings to us. That's our mission, or that's our purpose, to bring that into the world. Yes, it's okay to have a place in the woods where you can feel really protected from the external world, but I don't know, as far as Sandra's concerned, she's a city girl, and she always wants to be in the middle of it all happening, which is where that peaceful energy is needed. So this isn't like a critique on people that live in the woods, but it is a critique on people that think they're not part of the world, and the world is a hellish place, and I'm going to go escape from it out in my cave or out on my mountaintop. When we said, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but you have to bring your glorious mountaintop into the world and help clean it up. And I think that's all our jobs. That's the purpose of us making the contact with our higher self to begin with. You know, the Course is very clear about our, not debt, but our inseparable connection to our brothers and sisters. Like that this work that we do on ourselves is most advanced when we're also embracing and including our brothers and sisters in it. Now, this may not directly mean, okay, we've got to give everybody we know this lecture on A Course in Miracles and how great it is and they should be studying it. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that when you decide to do the Course in Miracles or apply the lessons in the Course in Miracles, you're including everyone around you in your own process. I mean, they're going to be the people that plug you in, you know? Like if your lesson is forgiveness and you need to really get that lesson, well, you get it faster when there's people around you plugging you in, right? So they're giving you the examples of the very thing that you need to look at and forgive in your life. So that's what I mean is everyone's included. It's like your whole life becomes an ashram and all the people in it are those lessons God would have you learn, and then apply your higher self to those lessons. You become adept at making the contact with your higher self in the situations where you need it the most that may be upsetting or may be activating or maybe you feel really plugged in by. So those are the situations that you need this connection the most. And life provides that. And that's what the Course means, like your brothers and sisters are all included in this process. You know, this line that I think of, it's from the, I think in the 200s, lesson 200s, just before, like 196 or something, where it says, no one is crucified alone and no one enters heaven by himself. So anytime you're feeling like a victim, your people around you are also affected by that. It's like sort of the condemnation. If you're feeling like a victim and somebody else is doing it to you, well then everyone is affected by that. So the condemnation or the crucifixion of the self doesn't happen isolated. It happens with all the people around you. So if that's the route you're going where you're feeling like a victim, that's affecting all the people around you. Just like when you make the contact with your higher self and you're not the victim and you invoke these other more positive energies, that is also affecting the people around you. So no one can enter heaven by himself. That's what that part means. When you make contact with your higher self, you're affecting everyone around you, and you automatically bring them up, and they're getting closer to their higher self, even if they're not even aware of it, right? They may not even be ever aware that the higher self is something important to them. But because it's important to you, and you're rising up in that energy, your energy is affecting everyone around you, and it's making that gap between their higher self and their ego smaller. You know, it's making that gap of their connection to their higher self smaller because you're closing the gap. So it's the spiritual work we do on ourselves is affecting everybody around us in a positive way. It's not possible to be at true peace and not bring peace to other people. They're going to feel it. You know, that lesson, I really love it. It says, I'm the light of the world, forgiveness is my function as the light of the world. Then it says, the light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. The light of the world brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. When you make contact with this light, which is your higher self, right? It's the perfect Mozart symphony. There's nothing out of place. Every note is beautiful. Every relationship is beautiful. The whole thing unfolds. It's like it's so uplifting. Your whole being, all aspects of your being, including your director and your violin section and your woodwinds, all of those parts of yourself are working in harmony to produce this experience that is ecstatically beautiful. And that includes all the people around you. The light of the world in me that I'm in contact with brings peace to every mind through my forgiveness. So that's your symphony you're playing. You're playing total forgiveness, total unconditional love. The light is in you. You're in touch with your higher self. You're not affected so much by the external things happening. You're bringing peace to all those situations. You're in balance. Your life is in order. It's simple. You're living in your higher self all the time, or most of the time. Maybe not like consciously aware of it every second, but you're living in it enough that you know that it's involuntary. You're in contact with your higher self, and it's always going to protect you in any situation. It's always going to give you the right direction in any situation. It's always going to help you know what to say when somebody throws something at you that's maybe, you're not, throws you off a bit. So it's always accessible, and it's always there as your guide. I give my life to God to guide today. That's lesson 233. So who are you giving your life to? When you say, I give my life to God, what does that amount to? Well, that amounts to saying, I am living in my higher self. Your higher self is always in contact with your divine source. That's another attribute. Your higher self is always in contact. I am spirit, I am spirit. Well, what's the nature of spirit? Spirit's always in contact with the creative force energy. It never separated. We came down, took bodies, developed personalities, have brains that have particular memories of particular things, and not always in contact with joy, invented death, So we did that separation. But also when we came down and did that sort of sleight of hand and felt separated from our source still came with us. Our higher self still came with us. Even though at a certain level we made mistakes, there was part of us that never made a mistake. Our higher self came down with us, never separated from the source. We made some errors, lost touch, lost our connection, lost our awareness of our connection. We did that. The Course calls that the separation. And then it says, well, the separation never really occurred because you wouldn't even be alive without your higher self in connection with the source energy of life. So it was an illusion that we thought we separated, but we did think we separated. And then we dreamed up all these other conditions that go along with the separation. Pain, suffering, grievances, wars, conflicts, uncertainties, insecurities. We made all those things up. So, but the higher self didn't get involved in them. And the higher self is what's going to lead us out of them and dissolve them, show us that they're, first of all, forgiven. Don't beat yourself up that you've made mistakes. They're forgiven. And then furthermore, they're not having an effect on your higher self. So the more we relate to our higher self, the less we relate to the ego self that has all the problems and has all the, fears and insecurities and conflicts and all of that stuff. So the more we relate to the higher self, the less we relate to all of that stuff, right? All of that stuff. And yes, in rebirthing, we look at the stuff. We say, oh, well, yeah, that stuff comes from a thought. I'm not good enough, or I'm bad, or I'm don't matter, or whatever. We try to see the cause and effect that's making up the stuff. But in the end, it's all stuff. If you're not in touch with your higher self, it's only going to be even a projection of joy, It's not the real thing. If it can revert to sorrow. So the higher self is absolute. It doesn't even get down involved in all that stuff. And it's the part of us that will release us. It's the part of us that will lift us above the battleground. There's a section in the text that says above the battleground. Well, the ego's involved in all kinds of little struggles and strifes and projects and things that flower, things that don't flower, all that stuff. The ego's down there constantly preoccupied, mostly with the past, as we read today. I see nothing as it is now. My mind's preoccupied with past thoughts. I see only the past. So that's the ego. It's involved in all the situations, all the problems. It's okay. We all need an ego. And we all have some situation to handle. But it's a lot easier to handle it when we say, okay, that's that level, but at this level, I have this higher self that's totally in perfection. It's in a state of grace almost, By grace I live, by grace I am released, by grace I give, by grace I will release. This state of grace, it's there, and we have to make the contact with it. Your grace is given me. I claim it. I claim it now. Or I claim the gifts forgiveness gives to me. This claiming is very important. I claim the gifts forgiveness gives to me. Your grace is given me. I claim it now. So the higher self, God, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call that, it's always giving us the grace, but we're not claiming it. We're making our problems real, and then we feel bad, and then when we feel bad because we're stuck in a loop of a problem we made up, it's hard to feel the grace when you're feeling not good. But it's our responsibility to make the contact with the higher self, with the grace, even when we're not feeling good. I mean, the not feeling good part is just the Holy Spirit saying, oh, you're going the wrong way. You're doing things that are not going to bring you joy. You're thinking thoughts that are not going to get you clear. So you're going the wrong way, and this is why you're feeling bad. So you've got to like do a course shift there. You've got to, like what Esther Hicks would say, pick another emotion higher up on the emotional scale. You know, she has a very good emotional scale. It starts with like peace and joy and delight at the top, and then down at the very bottom is despair. And then there's like about 25 gradations in between there, anger's in there, frustrations in there. So she says, well, in order to get back to the joy, you've got to go for a higher level. You know, you've got to kind of go back up the scale. And that's what the miracle is there to do. You know, if you're making a judgment about something and that's making you feel bad, you have to see that that thought does not mean anything. These thoughts do not mean anything. You have to be willing to let those thoughts go, because if you want to keep them, you're going to keep the result too. It's like when we, you know, very classic rebirthing 101, if you get in touch with what your personal I really is and you want to keep it, then you're going to get the same feelings, you know, the same negative results. And it's keeping you disconnected from your higher self. So much of the work we do is to undo the thoughts that keep us from making the contact with the higher self. And that's why we need, you know, spiritual practice is very important. It disengages us from the battleground, that we can see those thoughts, drop them, forgive them in ourselves, and come up a little higher on this emotional scale till truly we do feel the love of God within us. You know, when I first read that lesson years and years ago, 189, I feel the love of God within me now, 189. Then the next one is, I choose the joy of God instead of pain, 190. So those lessons, I didn't want to pretend. I didn't want to read them and say, well, yeah, I feel the love of God within me now, when my truth, so to speak, I don't know, what I was actually feeling was not the love of God. You know, I wasn't feeling this great elated joy that comes along with this notion of the love of God. So I worked with that lesson for quite a while, and I didn't make myself wrong for not feeling it, but I said, well, I'm not quite there yet. I'm not there feeling this love of God. Maybe I'm not there feeling my total connection to my higher self. But I said to myself, it's okay. I'm on the ascension ladder going up. I feel better than I did yesterday, and I feel better than I did last year, and I am going up. And I'm going to just keep on with it, keep with it. And I think that's what we all have to do with the Course in Miracles. It's like Yogi Bhajan said, the mantra of this age is keep up. Keep up. And sometimes we do feel like we're falling behind and not keeping up, and, oh, well, I've studied the Course in Miracles for 35 years and I'm not walking on water yet. So, well, maybe you were a religious aspirant for 30 lifetimes, and now you're getting much deeper clarity on the real direction or the real goal here. So be blessed that you got this thing called the Course in Miracles in this lifetime. And we have to start somewhere, right? We start with what we have, where we are, with what we have. And then the Course in Miracles gradually takes us a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. You know, maybe it's possible some people can go from 0 to 100 miles per hour and get enlightenment in that second, but usually with us, we do it in increments. We take steps. We have small visions that inspire us, that keep us going. I think that's the way most of it is for us. We study, we go a little bit up the ladder, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, and that's how it is. Sometimes we feel like we've gone down a few rungs, but then we pick ourselves up and we get back up there. So that's okay. That's the way it is. Tara Singh used to share this thing that Emerson said, and I remembered it. Emerson wrote, "I write after a truth. I'm writing to make contact with the truth, which I find, and then I lose it. But then I find it again." So it's like he never gives up. Like, yes, he makes that contact with the higher self, and it's brilliant, and he gets the insight, and wow, it's like he knows he's in his higher self, and he's connected to it. He's connected to the truth, and it flows out of him, and he writes something or says something that's right on with that, very profound. And then he says, later, when I try to write something else, I lose it. I don't have the contact. It's not flowing. It's not coming out right. You know, I had the contact with it, and it flowed, and it was beautiful. And then now I don't have the contact. I don't feel it. But then he says, but I don't doubt. I make a contact with the truth, and then I lose it, and then I find it again, because he doesn't doubt that was there. He had those moments of being totally out of the ego and connected to his higher self, and he has that experience. Maybe it was for a minute or two or a half an hour, but then he lost it. But then he doesn't doubt. He knows he can find it again. And I think that's the right relationship with this higher self. We have those moments where we're certain of the contact, and it's like a blessing. It's like a gift from God into us. We feel it, we experience it. You all shared, you did have the experience of it, so you know it's there. But when we're not having it, we don't doubt that it's there. And I think that's very important. Living with your higher self means you're not going to doubt that it's there, just because you may not be feeling it. If you read the lesson, you say, I feel the love of God within me now, and you say, well, I don't feel it. But you're not doubting that there is a love of God that you can feel, because you have felt it. Just like you have experienced your higher self. And we're not going to doubt it. Doubt is out. Doubt is out. And Emerson didn't doubt it either. He said, well, I made the contact, I had it, I produced this wonderful essay, self-reliance, whatever it was, and those words live forever. You know, those are inspiring forever. Just like the Course in Miracles is forever. Those words are going to be around. They're true words. That contact is there. But, you know, as individuals, we make that contact, and sometimes we lose it, but we're not going to doubt that we had that contact. And then, because we don't doubt, it'll come back to us, certain situations. You know, I had a kind of a gift over Christmas time. I think I shared it with some of you. It was actually the day before Christmas. It was my father's birthday. My parents are passed, but we were honoring my parents' birthdays because Mom was on the 18th of December, then Dad was the 24th. So I had their picture on the Babaji altar. And I thought, oh, on the 24th, I'll take a little picture of the picture on the altar and send it to my sister. Well, so I did. I got my iPhone and I lined it up and there was a candle in front. And I took this picture of the picture on the altar of my parents on their wedding day. And then when I looked at the picture that I had just taken, Mother had a halo around her. Her whole head was engulfed in this like aura of light, right? And it wasn't when I was looking at through the camera, it wasn't in there. So Mother had this aura, and then Dad had this blue orb on his heart. Now, where did that come from? But it was like a moment outside of time. I was like looking at this picture saying, wow, I mean, that's really who my parents really are, you know. I'm finally seeing them as God created them, and I can just let go of everything else. And it was like a miracle I had. It was like Jesus's gift to me for my Christmas present. So I immediately kind of sent the picture to my sister, and I said, well, I took this picture of Mom and Dad today, and look at Mom, she's got this aura, and Dad has this blue orb on his heart. And that's who our parents really were. They were simple people, but they were very connected somehow with their higher self, even though they had their own struggles. But there was something about them that put God in the first place. And I think that that's where I inherited my spiritual fervor, if you will. You know, my spiritual drive was from my parents, who were already somewhat connected. And this picture kind of showed me how connected they really were. And so it was kind of like my Christmas gift. So I felt really fortunate on that day. Yeah. We're almost to the end. Does anybody have a question? Yes, Norma? Go for it.
So, okay, so we have this connection to the higher self, and we can be guided and everything. So what would the role of Jesus and Babaji be?
Mm-hmm.
How is that different or similar, or
Yeah.
how does it play in?
Well, very, very similar, but it's like they're master higher self connectors in that they made their contact with the higher self and they never left it. And maybe they never were separated from it even when they came in, you know? Like they never fell into the forgetfulness of their higher self. So they're like master teachers. They're examples that guide us, that lead us, that show us what's possible in life when you're living from your higher self all the time. So they're just like master teachers. Like I often use this analogy: if you were going to learn to play the cello and you wanted to play, you know, the best you possibly could, and you had a teacher like Yo-Yo Ma or Pablo Casals or someone of that stature as your master teacher, you'd have a lot more opportunity to make it, right, by having that master teacher. So that's the role of Jesus and Babaji and the Divine Mother, the Dream Team. They provide support, they provide an example of what's possible in us, and they're also this higher self that we're trying to make contact with. That is they. They are the higher self in us. Like there's a lesson that says, we stand together, Christ and I, in peace and certainty of purpose. And in him is his creator as he is in me. So like, okay, so who would Jesus look to for guidance? He would look directly to his source. Like, because he's already at that level, it's only God. It's only the source energy that's guiding him. Now, we have some other little guides in there, wouldn't you say, that lead us the wrong way? Right, so we're not just with the source, but we do have this Christ self in us that can be our guide. So let's just say we have an ego and then we have our Christ self. And we can choose. We can be guided by the Christ self. Now the Christ self doesn't have, he's already transcended the ego, doesn't have to worry about it, wouldn't ever be fooled by going the direction of the ego. So that's the Christ. So if we're using the Christ self in us to be our guide, we can be certain that he's going to lead us the right way. So that's also the function of the teacher, is for the practical demonstration of this divine connection. Jesus is just the one who's living in the higher self all the time. So if we're following him, I will step back and let him lead the way, right? If we're following Jesus or the Christ, let's say, in us, then we have a much better chance of making this contact all the time. So that's the function. Yeah, you have a higher self, and Jesus is very much part of that higher self, because, you know, when it says what is the Christ, it says the Christ is the self we share. We share. So like at the personality level, there's a personality Norma, there's a personality Marcus, there's a personality Prue, and we all have different, slightly different little makeups and attributes. But then when we reach the Christ level, it's becoming more like one thing, and there aren't so many differentiations. Christ is the self we share that keeps us knowing that we're one with God. Because Christ knows constantly he's one with that source. So when we're in the Christ self, we're also in touch with our higher self, and we're also certain of our divine source. And that's the role of the Christ. Anybody else with a question? All right, that felt good. That felt clear, didn't it? It felt good, that talk. Yeah, I didn't say so many times. My friend's been trying to correct me on my use of the word so before a sentence. And I'm trying to eliminate it, but then you see these little words that you often say, or you go or you see how much you do it, and then you're like, wow, I'm doing that so unconsciously. Well, thank you. It was great. And I'll send you guys the link to this when I get the recording. God bless. We'll see. Some of you are in the A Year I Give to God program, and we'll see in about, 25 minutes. Yeah. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.